is here. We're already chatting during the commercial break.
We always chat. Before,
There's
after.
so much to catch up on. You know, we're going to deal with a tricky topic, and it's family generational decisions. And what that is, it's about talking to your parents and other members of your family about maybe shared properties. Like that's how this whole conversation started.
It all started, and a lot of the segments. So this is what I love talking to just you know, people on social media and at the park and other moms and dads. Is what are people talking about? And this was actually very much spearheaded by. I was talking with one of my girlfriends, and she said, "Karyn, you have to have a show on how to have tricky family conversations because we're in the process of deciding, should we sell the family cottage?" And I said, "Oh, that's really good. That's a good segment." So I thought, you know, it is, and whether or not it's how to sell, you know, whether or not to sell the family cottage, or how to figure out, like, in terms of vacation times and like how much access to get with kids, or sometimes it's like heavy stuff like funerals or wills. It's just how do you have those like tricky conversations that involve multiple generations, and it's just kind of good to have a little bit of a framework to really kind of work with it on.
A lot of us grapple with it, those conversations, and we don't even want to start going there. So you say we first have to start with assessing what are our tricky topics within our families.
Yeah, and you're going to probably find that as, like in our family, when every time we kind of hit a new kind of season with transitions, so like our kids are like small, but my nieces are like teenagers, so how does that change different in terms of adult functions versus children's functions? So anytime you have like a transition, a lot of times kind of conversations are going to come up. So it's just kind of good to be aware of, okay, what are those conversations that we need to be kind of aware of? And so we kind of plant that little seed. It doesn't mean necessarily we're talking about it now, but we plan to go, okay, you know what, when the time is right, we really do probably need to talk about X, Y, and Z.
Got it. So you have sort of a checklist going on in your head about what's going to be happening in the future. Then what do you do?
Okay, so this is like, and this is, I love giving a bit of a framework in terms of decision making. I actually teach decision making even with my kids. This is like the same exact process. So let's take the example of whether or not you should sell the family cottage as an example, because I find that's always kind of helpful when you learn certain principles. So what I would actually do is I would actually get, in that particular sense, let's say you've got like 10 or 15 people actually involved, I would actually do a bit of an informal family survey. Keep it light, keep it light, doesn't have to be anything heavy, and I would actually get people to answer 3 very specific questions. Question number 1 is, do you think it's time to sell the family cottage? Yes or no, and why? Okay, so what you're trying to do is you're trying to gather data. Okay, you want to try to make this as less emotional as possible, because that's the thing about family decisions. People can get very like hyper and very emotional. You want to try to make it much more cognitive almost around it. Okay, so do you think it's time to sell the family cottage? Yes or no? Then the next 2 questions are really important. What do you most value, and what do you least value?
About the cottage?
About the cottage.
Okay.
Okay. So, and then just get people to kind of answer it, because what you're going to find is when you get the information, people value different things. And what you're trying to do by having that kind of survey is you're just simply trying to get the information in front of you. And again, it kind of neutralizes it. Try to take the emotion out of it, which is really, really, really important in tricky family conversations.
Okay. So people have weighed in, and then they answer. And then is that going to give you a clear sign of how you proceed?
That's right. So then that goes into step number 3 is once you actually have the data, once you have all the information, then you can start being creative. Okay, now that we have all this data, what are some creative ways that we could maybe possibly make this work? So for example, because once you have the values, sometimes you can come up with some very creative actually solutions. Okay, so for example, some families have said, you know what, yes, we want to keep it, but we really want 1 week just for our family. Right? Sometimes if you go to the family cottage, there's like all the people there, and it's a very high value for some people. Like, I really just want it just for our own family. Okay, so that might be one particular solution. Another one says, you know what, no, let's have it every single weekend. Everybody's available, but Monday to Friday, it's for grandparents only. Okay, so this is where you can kind of start getting a little bit creative. I've had other families where they're like, you know, the high value is to have a new kitchen, but nobody else doesn't really want it, and they don't really have the finances. Okay, so then the solution is, okay, that's fine. Then you pay for it. If you want it, you pay for it, and maybe you get an extra 2 weeks at the cottage. So you see what I'm doing? So what happens is once you have those values, that data, what I actually encourage people to say, okay, well, how would it work if? And that is my favorite line I actually love teaching children. When you actually get the values in front, like, well, how would it work if we did this? How would it work if we did this? And you're trying to kind of come up with a creative solution that's really going to align up with everybody's values as much as possible.
For all of this to work, though, there needs to be one person that's
the kind of sets
the organizer,
facilitator,
the facilitator.
I would call them the facilitator. It's great if it's actually it would be great, like in this case, if it's like the older person, the mom, the dad. To be honest, I think that's probably the best. But sometimes they don't feel comfortable. Maybe they're not so skilled, so kind of it doesn't really matter. And sometimes sometimes it's the person who really is the most motivated to try to say, let's kind of try to figure out a great solution for everybody.
Right. Well, maybe it's the person that can't afford to maintain the cottage anymore, which is why the issue is even on the table, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's tricky because then you're dealing with resentment. But what's good about this is that people are actually putting it down on paper.
They're putting it on paper, and you're trying to neutralize it. You're trying to take the emotion out and really assess, okay, what really is the most important for you?
Right.
Here's what's most important for me. How can we kind of figure this out so that both of our needs actually get met? And I do find when I work with a lot of families that when we kind of get the data in front of us, there are usually at least 3 to 4 really solid options. But when we're emotional, we just stay so focused with what we want, and then that's when actually the conflict actually starts.
Right. It takes communication.
It takes the communication and try to kind of neutralizing it a little bit.
Okay, really good tips.